All right, so we're going to get started and people can just kind of join in as we go. But good evening and welcome to Thursday Night Live. This is an ongoing webinar series in order to remind myself which night Thursday is in this crazy world we're living in. I'm Brennan Barnard. I'm the Director of College Counseling at the Derryfield School and the College Admission Program Advisor at the Making Caring Common Project at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And this evening has been brought to us, like this whole series, from the Derryfield School and from the Character Collaborative. And tonight we have a dream team of admission leaders. And if you think I say that every week, you're right. No, no, we really do have a great group tonight, and I will introduce them in a second, and we will get rolling. But first, I just want to say this is being recorded, and we will send this out to folks who have registered after the fact. So if you don't get everything, you can go back and watch it again and again and again. And there'll be also recordings from previous webinars. And please use the chat function to share your questions as we're going along. I'm going to ask a few questions to begin, and then we will open it up to the peanut gallery, and we'll get going. I would want to introduce our guests tonight. First, we have Ashley Bianchi, who is the Director of Financial Aid at Williams College, our first financial aid leader we've had in this series. She joined Williams in August of 2018 after serving as the Director of Financial Aid at Lafayette College for 5 years. And Ashley has worked at Rhodes College and College of Charleston in admissions and financial aid as well. Ashley's been professionally involved in the regional and national levels at the College Board, and she served on the Executive Council of the Eastern Association of Financial Aid Administrators, EASFA. Am I saying that right? I don't know if that, as well as various committees for National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, NASFA. So welcome, Ashley. Thanks for being here with us. Next, we have Peter Hagan, and Peter Hagan is the Director of Admissions at Syracuse University. And he joined the staff of the Office of Admission at Syracuse, his alma mater, shortly after graduation. And in his current role, which he assumed in 2015, Peter oversees admission recruitment and programming and acts as a liaison with many offices across campus. He is a frequent speaker and panelist at secondary schools and active in professional organizations, including the National Association of College Admission Counseling and the College Board. And finally, we have a kind of sun-streaked Matt Hyde. Matthew Hyde is the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Dean of Admission at Lafayette College. Matt is in his 9th year as a leopard, as you can see, crawling on his shoulder there. And prior to working at Lafayette, Matt served in the Tufts University Admission Office for 6 years. Leading into his career in college admissions, Matt worked in independent school admission at Northfield Mount Hermon School, where he and I shared an office, and Milton Academy for 2 years, both boarding schools in Massachusetts. So thank you all for being here. It's wonderful for you to take some time to, as Matt would say, drop some wisdom on the greater listening audience. I want to begin, as we've begun all these webinars, and ask you each to just give us one truth about college admission. And Ashley, maybe I'll have you go last, but I'd love for you to give us one truth about financial aid as you see it. Peter, do you want to start? One truth about college admission?
You bet. That way nobody else can steal my answer. I think one truth that I believe is an enduring truth that in college admission, people are really at the center of this process, and Matt Hyde will probably tell us at some point not to say process, but I really believe that at the end of the day, we do the work and on sort of all sides of this college admission equation because we really believe in students and the value of education, and therefore sort of now and far into the future, we expect that this will remain a process where people matter the most.
That's great. Thank you. What do you say, Matt?
Yeah, Peter, what Peter said. You know, it is true, Peter, you're right. This is a human endeavor. It's about people, but that doesn't mean it's humane, nor does it mean it's fair. And we could never make selective college admissions fair. But my truth really has to do with the fact that selective admissions specifically is not a meritocracy based on achievement academically. We have the opportunity in crafting a class to assign the idea of merit, if my air quotes showed up in my background, merit to whatever you want. That's why this job is a whole lot of fun when we're constructing and creating classes out of young people.
That's great. Thanks. Ashley, what do you see
Hi.
from you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I always get to follow Matt Hyde, working with him for 5 years. I was always after Matt, so I always get to clean up his messes. But I will say certainly what Peter and Matt said are all true. And I think what I love the most about this work is that we work hand in hand and heart in heart, right? And so the financial aid process is very, very important. And I would say that admission and financial aid couldn't exist outside of one another. And so I think my truth is that financial aid is a huge, huge important part of the admission process, cycle, path, whatever you want to call it. And it is certainly an honor to do this work. I think we all three do it because of the people, because of the way that we get to see lives changing. And I think that is the truth that, as Peter said, will endure throughout this pandemic, before and after, and certainly during, are the people and how our work is so connected to one another and connected to how the outcomes of students and the lives that they share with us. And we're really lucky about that.
Thanks. That's great. And hopefully we can, as we get into the conversation, we can dig in a little more to that connection between financial aid and admission and how that works. And because I think that's something families are often kind of, it seems somewhat of a mystery to them. So, and then the next question I'll ask is just, again, kind of a broad one. And this time we're going to start with Matt Hyde. And that is, what role does character play in college admission?
Where I've worked, Brennan, and where I always want to work, it plays a central role. And I got an email last night, and Ashley, you're going to know this. I got an email last night from Brian. He's a graduate of, a soon-to-be graduate of Lafayette. He just finished up his coursework yesterday. An amazing young man from our local area who, in his email, he stated, listen, you took a chance on me. I graduated food insecure without a home with a 2.83 unweighted GPA. And I honestly, I denied him on the first go around, but I sent him a not yet letter. I said, there's something to you, the way you've engaged us and how you've comported yourself through this whole endeavor. Like, we believe in you. We encouraged him to spend some time at the local community college. He crushed it there. After a year, we were happy to take him into our mix. He's graduating summa cum laude from Lafayette with a Fulbright behind him. He's been abroad. He's been a celebrated member of our community, and he was here because he demonstrated amazing character at every turn of our whole admissions experience with him. It was clear to us that he demonstrated the potential that would blossom beautifully in our space, and it did. So I love the fact that we can get well beyond the data and the numbers to really try to mine the voice and the presence of young people in this world. So character, it is central to the work that we do.
And more important now than ever. Ashley, what do you see as the role of character?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, oh, Brian, I love him. I talked to him yesterday too. I'm glad that you heard from him. I encouraged him to reach out to you. So yeah, so I think certainly, I think building community is the most fun part of the work that we get to do. And central to anyone who you want to share community with, whether that's in your neighborhood, whether that's at the school that you work in, and certainly on our college campuses, we want to make sure that that is an essential part of building a community. So, you know, as Matt said, I think there's a lot of really important parts of an application, and there's a lot of times where we're sitting in a room trying to decide, you know, if a student can be successful there. And I think character goes a long, long way of overcoming a lot of things that may on an application look like maybe they can't be successful. And so we take a lot of bets, we take a lot of chances. And when there are people like Brian in the world, and Ricky, who's also graduating right beside Brian, who are two of my favorite seniors this year at Lafayette, that is a huge, it's a confidence booster in us, and that allows us to take more and more chances, and, you know, kind of allows us to build that community. And so I think character is a central part of a community, and again, can overcome a lot of other things that we see that maybe are not things that we always highlight in an application.
Thanks. What do you say, Peter?
No, I think as much as it's important to build communities where character is valued, I think it's real important for those of us who represent institutions to have to represent the character of those places, but more importantly, sort of that we can be operating central to the missions of our, you know, of the places we work. So there's a lot of pressure on people who work in higher education to deliver often multiple competing goals that can be difficult at times, and there probably could be some dicey ways to pull those off. But so I think character matters for professionals as much as it does if we're going to ask students to take it seriously as well.
It's a great point. It's a great point. So should we dig in a little more to this? I mean, Matt, you probably see some of these questions in the chat here. So, you know, how are you all assessing character? I mean, if you're looking at an application, kind of the snapshot of a student, what are ways that you look for it, and where do you find it? And what do you see?
It can be pretty squishy, no doubt, trying to sort of wrap our head and heart around the much more subjective qualities of a candidate. But I value our understanding that, you know, at 17, 18 years old, these young people, they're not fully developed. That they are full of ignorance and assumptions about the world. But I like that at our institution and institutions like ours, it is our job to push these students to replace whatever ignorance they have with interest and whatever assumptions they have with awareness. So what we're trying to gauge in this much softer space of an application is, does a student care? Do they have an interest in other people? Do they have an open mind and heart to those who are different than they are? And that can be expressed in lots of different ways. And certainly through the voice of an application in essays and short answers. And we're still one of those colleges that still really does value an interview. So we spend a whole lot more time than 5 to 10 minutes trying to figure the student out. We're going to assess their academic credentials, their data in about 1.5 minutes, but we're going to spend another 20, 25 minutes trying to figure the student out and the willingness they have to lean into life and learning with an open mind and an open heart. And that can be reflected in lots of ways, because I think Peter would agree when we're evaluating a candidate, we're making massive assumptions based on incomplete information. But these candidates can give us little nuggets and bits and pieces of themselves that allow us to make inferences about who they are and what matters to them.
Peter, do you want to expand on that at all? Is there any other ways that you're kind of tapping into this snapshot of a student's character?
No, I guess the one thing I think I would say, so I often feel like I'm speaking in defense of big schools, because at least in our process, this is just an economy of scale. We also do interviews. We also invest far more than 10 minutes in most of the students who sort of cross our desks. And so, I think certainly places that take this seriously, we have to make that investment of time and energy to make sure that we're doing the work. And to admit we can't get it right all the time because we're dealing with an imperfect process for sure.
You can stay unmuted because I have a follow-up question for you. And it's this question about auditions for musical theater programs and for performance-based programs and things like that require kind of on-campus auditions and things like that. Any sense for how that's going to roll as we move into the fall?
So our first round of auditions typically happens electronically. I have no sense of whether we will be in a position to continue. It's hard to know into January when most auditions take place, at least in our process, what we'll be ready to do. So I expect, like many decisions, we will make the best decision we can based on the health and safety of our community and the students we're working with. But will be interesting. I think right now we're just trying to figure out how we can do studios and in the fall, but we'll find a way to audition people for sure.
To be determined. Gotcha.
Yeah, like everything else.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
And feel free again to use the chat to list your questions, whether it's on issues about admission in general or admission in this cycle and what we're seeing. I do want to follow up on kind of to come back to this idea of kind of the Brian and food insecurity and how your schools get a sense for a student's context and the environment they're coming from and how important that is and what other pressures they have on their time beyond, what they're doing in schools and things like that. Maybe Matt and then Ashley, maybe you could kind of talk from the financial angle.
Yeah, I think this is where sort of Mashley can address, thinking about the 5 years that I worked with Ashley, we brought admissions and financial aid into not just the same sentence, but the same breadth of the work that we did. At our price point, you can't talk about affordability and opportunity without leveraging the significant resources these colleges have to make Lafayette and the colleges like it accessible. So we're very interested in the context from which a student is applying and pay a lot of attention to their reality at home. Socioeconomically for sure. And we can make a whole lot of guesses and inferences, which oftentimes we do, but they tend to be much more grounded and well supported when we can connect and have an open conversation with our colleagues in financial aid.
Yeah, and I'll just say, both now while at Williams and also in my previous work, as Matt alluded to, that is a huge part of a conversation that we have, whether we're being need aware, whether we're being need blind, is how we are going to be able to support students when they're on campus. And so I think the details of that question really get to the point of, can a college be successful at supporting students year-round if that is the scenario in which they are coming from? And I think that really highlights the importance of having partners across campus that really that show partnerships. I happen to have a spouse that works in this work as well, and his whole sole job is to make sure that his students who are leaving the Rio Grande Valley in Texas are going to be successful in colleges across the country where they're coming from very limited resources, where they won't be able to get home for every holiday, and how those colleges can support students beyond just the, classroom experience, quote unquote. And so I think it's really, really important when college counselors are sending their students out to know that background and to know what that student's going to need. And, you know, you guys are on the front lines of helping guide students to the right kinds of colleges. And so I think for students like Brian and so many others, where you know that this experience is going to need to be a little bit different and perhaps a little bit tailored, that you help them select the right colleges. And that's why you're such heroes in the work that you do, is to find the right colleges for students that can sort of have that, what we call at Williams, wraparound support, right? So we talk about sort of prior to their enrollment, their very first year till after graduation, we have this wraparound approach where, you know, we're very fortunate to have the resources to do it, but a lot of colleges with a lot fewer resources are doing it too, because they know it's important to the student's well-being. They know it's important to the student's success in the classroom.
Well, and I'm going to stay with you for a second, because do you see that changing at all? I mean, as you've had conversations with people in your professional association, kind of amidst the COVID-19, I mean, are you seeing, are financial aid budgets getting slashed along with, you know, everything else? And I mean, how's that landscape changing?
Sure. Yeah, I think the colleges that I've seen so far have really put students at the center of all of their decisions thus far. And I've seen more and more colleges talking about emergency financial aid, about putting out asks to alumni for, you know, one-day campaigns, you know, those sorts of things. Again, even for colleges with way fewer resources, are really focused on what we can do to help students. And I think, you know, kind of a misnomer about my profession specifically in financial aid is that we're there sort of as a gatekeeper or as sort of a get out. And that is not the role in which we play. That's the role that we're cast sometimes because we have so many damn federal regulations to follow. But, you know, at our heart and soul, we are here to help students. And so I think when we are able to do that and we're empowered to do that, I think because of resources, whether they be one-time resources like we're seeing now with COVID, or, you know, ongoing resources, I think we are all the better as a profession, and, you know, takes out some of that competition between school and school and that sort of thing. And so I think, again, the colleges that I've seen are, if they have to cut, they're cutting financial aid last, hopefully. And I've seen that over and over. You know, we're all probably facing our own budget cuts within, you know, both our operating budgets, but also our, you know, perhaps salaries and, you know, building campaigns and those sorts of things. But last on our list, and I know that's true about many colleges, last on our list are the support that we're giving to students. I think it'll be all the more important going forward, just as it was, you know, in the early 2000s with the global downturn.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So let's turn to maybe Matt, you can talk a little bit about this. So I'm a junior in high school. Where should I be right now? What should I be doing? Where should I be in the college experience? You know, what should I?
Thanks for not using the P word, not a process.
Gotcha.
Experience, journey, moment.
Adventure, yeah.
Yeah.
Where should I be? What should I be doing? What should I be thinking about?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first, acknowledge the fact that you're about 465 days away from your college experience, if you're going to sort of follow a traditional timeline. So it's going to happen and happen relatively quickly. But even before you start trying to wrap your head and heart around specific institutions, you need to take a good hard look in the mirror and think long and hard about what your deal is. Who are you? Where have you been? What have you been up to? You know, that introspection, I think, is the first step to be taken that oftentimes is uncomfortable for a 17-year-old. But you can't try to pretend to know what you want until you know yourself well. And acknowledge the fact that you have a distinct voice and narrative that's uniquely yours. So introspection, I think, is the very first step. Once you have a good sense of who you are in this moment, knowing that you're going to mature and evolve on lots of fronts in the years to come. But at this point, what matters to you as a student, as a scholar, as an artist, as an athlete, as an activist, as a friend, as a son, as all these things that you claim as identities, what matters to you and why? And how does that shape the lens that you're looking through at college opportunity and awesome institutions that exist out there?
That's great. And Peter, do you want to follow up? Just so now I've looked in the mirror. I know who I am. I figured that piece out. What what should I be doing to show my interest in schools? What should I be doing to learn about schools and really kind of dig in?
Well, shoot, I guess right now, once you've done this broad and deep process, you should start going to a lot of Zoom meetings. But I think that, once you're ready to begin actually sort of putting some oars in the water and investigating some schools, we're all going to be moving at the paces of our states and regions in terms of visit opportunities. But I know that that many colleges and universities are providing really robust ways to engage from greater distances, and I think that that will continue even once in-person programming has resumed. And so, taking advantage of opportunities to connect with admissions folks, and perhaps more broadly at the institution, those opportunities certainly will exist. But at your own pace, like, we're going to be here to help students every step of the way. And for a lot of people, there's more important things to focus attention on now. But once you're ready, we're certainly here to help.
Are your schools going to be expecting those touch points as you look at applications next fall? I mean, are you going to be how are you going to be anticipating students to kind of interact with you? Matt or Peter, yeah.
We do want a degree of demonstrated understanding. We want it to be sort of clear to us that you've taken the time to know who we are and what we're all about. And you don't have to be on campus to figure that out, though that does help the cause on all fronts. So in terms of how we capture demonstrated interest and how you engage with us through this whole experience of searching for and applying to college, some schools are paying a whole lot of attention to that. There's a strong correlation between how you've engaged with us and the likelihood that you will enroll. In this era of strategic enrollment management, that behavior, it matters. So, when we're hosting our online information sessions, our live Q&As, our open houses that we're hosting in this virtual space, you're registering for those things, and you're showing up or you're not. So colleges that are paying attention to this are actively going to be capturing your engagement in that active kind of way. And the more passive opportunities you have to demonstrate interest is, how are you sort of absorbing the information we're sending to you? Are you opening emails? Are you reaching out and touching base with us when you have questions? Those are things that can inform a conversation down the line around a candidate. It doesn't dictate or define choices necessarily, but it can inform conversations depending on which school you're talking about. So we make ourselves widely available, even in this virtual space. We're not quiet about who we are and what we have to offer. So we hope that this class that has had the sands shift under their feet in terms of what their college church is going to look and feel like, we're hoping that they can sort of pick up and meet us where we are, because this is new and different and strange for us too.
And do any of your schools have plans? Have you determined whether or not you're going to be visiting high schools this fall, or is that just still wait and see? I mean, have any of you said we're just not going there, or it's still to be determined? Okay.
TBD.
Yeah. And same thing with, there was a question earlier in the chat about when school will start. Are you changing your schedule and that kind of thing? Any insight on that, or is that still TBD as well?
Syracuse announced its plans yesterday, which is to begin classes a week earlier than we would have, and to end in-person instruction the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I expect, I know the Chronicle has a pretty solid sort of tracker of different schools' plans. and I think when you look at that, the pie chart is pretty, there's no overwhelming trend. A lot of places are still figuring it out, planning for in-person instruction, but you know, obviously there's a lot of variables to be considered, but that was news for us late yesterday.
And has there been any conversation about, based on the fact that, you know, students, I mean, who knows, maybe they'll be able to get on your campuses in the end of the summer to visit, who knows? We can be hopeful, but any conversation about early decision, early action deadlines? You know, usually students are submitting early applications in early November. Any thought on pushing those back to give students a little more time to explore, or are you holding fast?
Ours is TBD right now. We have a later date. We have a November 15 date. So we're grateful we don't have a November 1 at the moment, and are just sort of hanging tight at the moment. But certainly, I think, as evidenced by our flexibility, I think from March forward, I think we'll do, you know, what's best for students, we hope. And, you know, it'll be an interesting fall.
Yeah, and Brennan, I'll just share, as an enrollment manager rolling out of the spring that just was, we're going to be aggressive in ED no matter when that date is. And I think I can speak confidently that's likely going to be the case across those that offer early decision opportunities. We don't anticipate the volume that we've had because of this inability to really search and vet this top choice that we hope is a visceral reaction to a college or a university. Like, this is we want that to be a visceral reaction as opposed to, I got a better shot if I apply early. We don't want that. But because of that, we feel like we're going to have smaller pools, which I think, you know, we'll have less to be aggressive with.
But when you say aggressive, potentially taking a larger portion of your class early decision?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Peter, any thoughts on that, on the early piece?
No, I mean, I think I, in concept, agree with everything Ashley and Matt have said, though we have not made decisions. You know, I think one thing that's been said, and I'm tempted to agree with many times over the course of the last several weeks, is that will be one effective indicator of how a college may respond to current juniors is how it's responded to its current students. And for students who had, you know, whose travel issues, inability to leave, you know, I mean, any number of circumstances that affected the way this spring unfolded for our students is a great, probably indicator of the kind of flexibility and understanding that will be offered as time marches on. We hope in much easier public health conditions in the not so distant future for current applicants or this upcoming cycle's applicants.
And Brennan, I just
Ashley,
add the idealist like this idea. I was going to say, we don't necessarily love the idea. We don't love the fact that there could be more action and more aggressive behavior in ED. I don't think it's necessarily healthy for 16 and 17-year-olds to feel like they need to make this choice and force it. So we don't like that that's the case, but in the end, our efforts in ED have a direct connection with the bottom line that we're delivering in terms of having a solvent class in hand.
Yeah. And you're certainly not alone there. I mean that's, yeah, that's the trend. Whether, you know, there's a whole debate about who that serves, and, you know, but it's a balance, right? Ashley, can you talk about just generally, I mean, not in this year necessarily, but generally how early decision, and just for those who might not know, early decision is the binding application process where if you're admitted, then you're kind of bound to, you just apply to one school. And how does that impact financial aid? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's one of the many "it depends" stances in our world, but generally, yes. If you're, raising your hand to go early decision to a place, typically speaking, you've sort of shown your cards, if you will, from a financial aid standpoint. And so I'll just sort of give a couple of, I've been at 4 institutions, 4 very different places, 4 similar places too, though, so kind of different. But I'll say that at every institution, the approach has been just a little bit different. For folks who have merit aid, I think it's a really big deal to make a decision about early, because merit aid is intended to incentivize enrollment. And so when you're raising your hand and saying, I'm coming no matter what, that incentive for enrollment is lessened for sure. Certainly at every school I've ever been at, there's always been a moment of saying, well, this student actually really does deserve a merit scholarship, and so we go forward with that. But there is a moment of conversation when you're at a school that doesn't have merit or doesn't have merit in the way that some other schools do. It doesn't matter as much, right? Because if we're meeting your need, whatever the need is, whenever it is you apply. So it really varies by institution. I'll say at schools I've been at, if you haven't set your costs yet, you're sort of signing on the dotted line for a place that you don't know what the cost is going to be. That's a pretty scary moment for a family who really cares about college costs. So, if I had my own utopia, I don't think I would have early decision as part of it. But certainly, and from a financial aid perspective, it is a really challenging thing. Fortunately, we have in the last 10 years or so developed a lot of tools to help families learn a lot more about financial aid in the early portion. And we as colleges have gotten a lot better at talking about financial aid early. And when President Obama put the prior year things in place, that really also helped with early decisions. So again, over the past probably decade, there has been a lot of movement towards making early decision more accessible for all income levels. But certainly, if you really care about college costs and want to compare college, early decision is not for you and your family. That's really the bottom line.
And how often do you have students who, this was a kind of a follow-up question that just came in, how often do you have students who are released from the early decision agreement because they can't make it work economically?
Sure. Yeah, it happens. It certainly happens. I think, again, students have a lot of tools in their tool belt now that they didn't have 10 years ago. The net price calculator, the quit calculator, the conversations with, financial aid people that you can actually look at the same tax return that you're going to be using to evaluate the application. All of those sorts of things are all tools that we did not have a decade ago that we do have now. But certainly there are times in which we just can't make it work, whether that is, a contrary parent, whether that is a student who went rogue and got things going without their family's consent. But at schools that meet need, that is not a reason to back out of your agreement because we've met your need, right? And so there's a dichotomy there, obviously, between schools that meet need and schools that don't. It is an out, and that is great for students and families, especially if they haven't gotten on the same page. But I would really, really encourage folks to get on the same page if early decision is part of your conversation for this fall, to get on the same page about financial aid before you get to the point at which all 3 people involved have to sign that agreement. And we take that very seriously.
Yeah, and even if the decision isn't on your radar, you need to get on the same page financially. Yes. I mean, back Indeed. Now for juniors now, right? I mean, those are really important conversations to be having as a family. Like, what are we going to be able to afford, and who's going to make that decision, and how's that going to guide the application, the building the list, and everything from the very start is so crucial. Matt?
Brendan,
Absolutely.
it is, and I just want to hammer this point home, because it's not just the ability to afford the experience. Gauge what that is. It's the willingness you have to afford that experience, and I think that's where a lot of students are getting stuck. Where by our institutional methodologies, the parents, the guardians, they have the ability to afford it, but they're less and less willing to do that, to make those sacrifices, because Ashley's, I think the best line I've ever heard is, financial aid offices aren't in the business of funding lifestyles. So investing in significant college cost is a huge decision to be made. So going back to you being a junior in high school, Brennan, it puts you in a tough spot. I was like, all right, whoever's supporting me here, what willingness do you have to afford this experience with and for me? But that needs to happen between now and before you get too deep into the summertime. And to Ashley's point, a lot of these resources out there will help you understand of what you can expect in terms of financial aid.
Peter, do you want to talk also about this kind of issue of merit? Because I think it's really important for, and Ashley, you touched on this from different schools, but it's really important for students to understand the merit process at those schools. Because some schools do guarantee that whether you apply early or regular, that you'll get the same merit package. I don't know, Peter, can you elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, we are a place that offers merit aid, and we meet need. We do so, though, I think sometimes it feels like, and perhaps this year more than any other, there was this impression that that money was coming out of two different buckets for families who demonstrate need and also receive a merit award. They don't, the merit goes towards the unmet need. But in terms of early decision, I think that's a real important question to ask, is if the method to determine eligibility for merit aid changes between the application plans. For us, it doesn't. I happen to think that's very tacky. But there are certainly places whose objectives would enable it to not be the case.
That's great, thanks. And then maybe just a thumbs up, thumbs down. Does your, some schools do kind of pre-reads for financial aid, so that families can, oh, there we go, that kind of sometimes, that you can submit some information beforehand and they'll give you a sense for what you'll be awarded. And like Ashley said, there is the net price calculator on every college's website. That will give you some idea, but it's helpful to also be able to do those pre-reads. Okay, one more question on financial aid, and then we'll kind of move to some other stuff. When a college says it's need-based, what exactly does that, need blind, I think they're saying. What's the difference between need blind, need aware? Can you unpack some of that for us quickly?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'll start and then others can certainly add in. But yeah, so when I was saying earlier that we had need-based awards, that means that all of our financial aid is dedicated to students who have financial need based on our determination of that through completing some applications, right? And so we determine what your need is, and then we meet your need with that need-based aid. So that's kind of what that is, versus merit-based aid, which is based on, a student's sort of ability to succeed in the classroom or outside the classroom and athletics or academics or talents in the arts, those sorts of things. And so that's sort of the difference between need-based aid and merit-based aid. And then need blind versus need aware. Need blind means there is no negative impact on a student's enrollment choice, or on the college's choice to enroll a student, whether they need financial aid or not. So that is a need blind process. A need aware process is that somewhere in the determination of admission, a lens towards a student's ability to pay what was considered. So whether that was at the very beginning or the middle or the very end, that you claim to be need aware if you have looked at a student's ability to pay or their intention to get financial aid. So that's the difference between need blind and need aware.
Do you have a sense for, if you had to guess, kind of the number of schools that are actually legitimately need blind, like has no, on two hands you can count them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of them. Aren't a lot of them. I often recommend this page, and those who've presented with me before will know this, but there is a really good Wikipedia page actually that breaks down all the different, like, need blind but meets need aware but meets need. It's all these like different scenarios, because there's really a lot of them if you think about it. Like the determination of being need blind or need aware, also whether you meet need or not. Like those two combinations are actually really important to know. So there's a really great Wikipedia page. And so just Google it out there and it comes up, and it's actually pretty accurate. And so for the schools that are need blind, I think you Google, I've done it a couple times, but I think you Google like colleges who are need blind or something like that. And it's a Wikipedia page that pops up, and it's whoever's maintaining it. Kudos. I hope you're on this call because you're doing a pretty damn good job. But yeah, there are a couple handfuls. I think that would be in the category of 100% need blind who also meet 100% of need. They happen to also not, a lot of them have merit aid, so they're giving financial aid to those who need it, without sort of any sort of other intention. But even within that, there could be a group of schools that are need aware for international, but are need blind for domestic students. So there's all kinds of flavors of this mess that we live in.
Thank you, Ann Atkins, for putting the wiki, the page in the chat. So
nice. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Ann.
You shall receive. Matt or Peter, can you talk a little bit about when you're, I think this is a question families have a lot, which is, they're filling out the common application, and there's that question: do you plan to apply for need-based financial aid, or do you plan to apply for financial aid? And I often have families say, how should I answer that? Is that going to impact my chances for admission? How would you guide them? Peter, you want to start?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you check the box or not, because we still get the data. So you can say you're not applying for financial aid, but then we're need aware. So we at times take that into consideration, and lo and behold, if you've applied for aid and demonstrated need, it does, like your box checking. What was the question about character earlier? I think maybe you just tell the truth, and sometimes you just don't know, and that's fine. But like, the only thing that checking that box does in our particular process is alerts you. If you check that box and haven't submitted an application, we're going to do some follow-up communication to make sure we can get those resources in front of you. So there's, and 80% of students at Syracuse receive institutional aid. So there's not, it's not a huge disadvantage, I mean, we expect that most students are applying for aid.
Well, but I think there's also sometimes for families who can afford the full boat, they wonder, is this going to impact the ability to get merit aid, right? So like I might not qualify for need-based financial aid. Should I still check that box so I can be considered? And I think that's often the.
Yeah, the all too often answer in selective college admissions is it depends, right? There are places that ask you to apply for aid to submit a FAFSA in order to be eligible for merit aid. We're not one of those places, but that's a good question to ask, if there are places on your list that even if you intend to pay or can afford to pay, but that makes you eligible for merit aid, then yeah, I guess you should do it.
Yeah. Great. All right. I'm going to pull us back out a little. There's a question earlier. So now I'm no longer a junior in high school. I'm a sophomore, maybe freshman in high school, and I'm just starting to kind of explore. Yeah, I know the schools that everybody talks about and that are kind of I've heard about are most selective and things like that. But how else should I kind of expose myself? Oh, not expose myself. How else should I get to know colleges? And how should I start my search? And any thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I'm hoping that a sophomore or freshman in high school isn't getting overinvested in a college search. I'm hoping that they invest deeply in exploring what matters to them in and beyond the classroom, how they engage co-curricularly, extracurricularly. But I acknowledge that we get noisy quickly with our sophomores. And, when it comes to especially athletic recruitment is advancing how we sort of invade the world of these young people when they're 14 and 15 years old, in my opinion, way too early. But the landscape is competitive. So we are trying to instill ourselves into the hearts and minds of sophomores. I think pay attention to what we have to share if you think we're of interest to you. But I apologize on behalf of all my colleagues nationwide that, we're going to send you a lot of information. Disregard what you're not interested in and move on. And then begin to siphon out those schools that you think ultimately could be of interest to you. Pay a little bit of attention to that. That will inform how you approach your exploration in a more purposeful way as you roll through your junior year and into your senior year. There's so many ways to get to know the college search experience. And there's a lot of third-party purveyors who are making a ton of money and trying to sort of wind you up and feel like they have all the answers. They don't. But they're happy to take your money. So I think you just need to take a deep breath and think long and hard about who you are and what matters to you. And then, start to dabble a little bit in the information that we're sending to you and have fun exploring the World Wide Web. And what's out there on your time and on your terms. So don't let it start too early. I think that's unhealthy and can become a fixation through high school and a distraction to what you truly should be doing.
That's great. Okay, so we're closing in on an hour here, and we really appreciate all your time. I'm gonna kind of wrap us up with this question I've been asking all the panelists. And that is knowing what you know now, having been on the other side of the curtain and seeing how the sausage is made, I guess you could say. If you were to go back and do your college search differently, what would you do? What would you do differently? Or what would you change? Or, maybe your own children, what are you going to tell them to do differently than you did? Peter, you want to start? Then we'll go Ashley and then Matt.
Yeah, well, my kids are in the Syracuse classes of 2034, 2036, and 2038. But shoot, if it was me, I guess I wish I looked at Lafayette. But honestly, I think I was one of those very few people who went into college admission because I loved the college admissions process. I loved visiting and applying to schools, and I think it's because I was clueless and didn't realize that it was a really anxiety-inducing process for a lot of people. But Syracuse was a fluke for me, and I'm so glad it was. So I don't think I would have changed a thing about my college search, because it was, at the end of the day, my good friend Sheila Riley always says, this is a process about decision making. And I think I got a lot better at making decisions in my college search. And although, I would have relished the opportunity to go to Lafayette College, I guess I turned out okay so far.
Or Williams, of course. Ashley?
Let's say or Williams, come on. Yeah, I'll go next. So it's kind of funny that I do the work that I do. First of all, my family has no idea what I do for a living. They sort of like pretend that I am a financial advisor, which is hilarious because that's so far from what I do. But I'm a first generation college student, and so the college search process was not a thing. I graduated with 20 people in my class from a really, really small school in a really, really rural area. I really have a heart for rural education because of it. But it's kind of a miracle that I'm where I am, because it's so bizarro that that I work in the field that I do and do the work that I do. But so in my town, you either went to Ole Miss or Mississippi State, and that all depended on which football team you cheered for. And so we happened to cheer for the Bulldogs. So I'm a Mississippi State grad and a huge Bulldog fan, but I don't know that I'd recommend going to college because you like the football team, although it worked out really well for me. The reason I do the work that I do, though, is because I had a terrific college experience. I grew, I learned, I changed who I was and who I am today because of it, and ultimately went and got a graduate degree because I figured out that people can actually go to college to work at a college. And so that's the reason I do this work, is so that students can have the kind of experience that I had, the transformative experience that I had. And, that's my favorite part of what I do every day. So would I change anything? Probably not. I mean, I can't imagine where else would I've gone? I can't even think about, I was one of 4 people in my whole high school who went to a 4-year college the year that I graduated high school. And so, it's a fluke sort of thing. So the college search process, it's hilarious that I work again in the environment that I work in. And we talk about, college search, and I have an 11-year-old and we're already talking about where he's going to go to college. So it's a whole different world for me.
Well, thank you for the work you do. And you can tell him to talk to Matt Hyde about being an 11-year-old and thinking about where he's going to go to college.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you share that. I mean, Ashley and I, we're obviously essentially the same person sometimes. And, we used to relish conversations about, what if you went to Bowdoin and I went to Mississippi State, 2 vastly different institutions. But, I would love to have had that kind of experience. And I wish my mind were much more open, because I grew up sort of in the opposite kind of setting. I went to a precious boarding school where 100% of the kids go to college. It was an expectation. And I was the third of 3. So when it came time for me to look at college, my parents said, go look at college. And I went camping instead. On the way back, just drove through Bowdoin and met the coach, and I ran a fast mile, and he said, hey, I can help you get to Bowdoin. I'm like, that sounds okay. And ta-da. But, it's crazy to think that had I not had sort of that happenstance, let's just roll through this college because I've heard of it and it sounds cool, the coach has been in touch. Well, I now have my wife and my family here in this house with me because she went to Bowdoin, because she had a Latin teacher in Ohio that was a Bowdoin grad. So it's amazing how life works out in the way that it does. I wish I were more intentional and opened my mind to lots of other places. I was very tunnel vision. This is where people from my high school go to college. And this was happened to be on that list, and it worked out. I wish I'd opened up my mind to other things, because I would not Ole Miss, of course not Ole Miss, but I would love to go back in time and have an experience at a big, massive flagship state university. A different kind of education, but a wonderful one, and a different kind of experience that I would love to have had. So I'd still like to have the experience that I had, because I got a family out of the deal and an awesome wife. But it would be cool to have a different kind of experience, because, knowing how awesome Ashley is and the experience she had, I feel like I also went to Mississippi State.
Thanks.
I might just add that in some ways, Syracuse University may be the crossroads of those experiences.
You're right. You were to marry Bowdoin and Mississippi State, you get Syracuse.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's perfect. I think we should all go back to Syracuse together.
Well, and it's a good point, because you all had very different paths and you all seem to turn out fairly well. I mean, we all have our quirks, but we we really appreciate you being here tonight and for sharing your stories and sharing your wisdom with everyone. Next week, here in the same time slot, same bat channel, we will have Joy St. John from Wellesley College. We will have Elizabeth Sharon from Northeastern University, and we will have Amin Abdul Malik Gonzalez from Wesleyan College, or Wesleyan University. So come back and join us then, and I wish you all a wonderful evening and weekend, long weekend at home. And thanks again to all three of you, and be well and stay well. Bye-bye.